the mastermind behind an online fraud shop used to con victims out of more than £100 million, has been jailed for more than 13 years. Tejay Fletcher, 35, bought a £230,000 Lamborghini, 2 Range Rovers worth £110,000, and an £11,000 Rolex, after making around £2 million from iSpoof.cc website. He was the founder and leading administrator of the site, which was brought down last year in the UK's biggest fraud sting. Criminals were offered tools that allowed them to disguise phone calls so that they appeared to be from a trusted organisation such as a bank, enabling them to empty their targets' accounts. Victims around the world were defrauded of at least £100 million, including a minimum of £43 million from people in the UK, Southwark Crown Court was told. The website made about £3.2 million in Bitcoin, with the lion's shares of about £2 million ending up with Mr. Fletcher, said the prosecutor, John Adjacott. Mr. Fletcher last month pleaded guilty to 4 charges, including making or supplying an article for use in fraud, encouraging or assisting the commission of an offence, possession of criminal property, and transferring criminal property between the 30th of November 2020 and the 8th of November 2022. Judge Sally Cahill, KC, jailed him for a total of 13 years and 4 months, telling him, for all the victims, it was a harrowing experience. One victim lost £3 million, while the 4,785 people who were reported as being targeted to the action fraud lost about £10,000 according to the police. The judge said they suffered damage to their businesses, personal financial problems, sleeplessness, depression, emotional stress, and fallouts with family members. She told Mr. Fletcher, who had 18 previous convictions for 36 offences, he didn't care about them, adding, the late expression of remorse is regret for being caught, rather than empathy for your victims. The evidence, in my view, shows very clearly you had a leading role and an active role in creating a sophisticated article for fraud, which generated a substantial profit for you. Simon Baker, KC, defending, had told the judge his client had no idea of the scale of the eventual fraud when he set up the website. But the judge told Mr. Fletcher, as is the case with any successful business, you probably didn't realise how successful and profitable your enterprise would be. Mr. Fletcher was arrested at his girlfriend's house in East London last November in a global operation to bring down iSpoof as part of the UK's biggest fraud sting. Judge Cahill praised the Metropolitan Police for their investigation, which involved 700 days of work. The Met said iSpoof was created in December 2020 and at its peak had 59,000 users, with up to 20 people a minute targeted at one point by callers using technology brought from the site. The scam calls, along with other features offered the site to obtain passwords and pins, were used to empty the victims' bank accounts. Users of the website paid hundreds of pounds or thousands of pounds a month for its features, which were marketed on a channel called iSpoof Club on the encrypted messaging app Telegram. Court heard Mr. Fletcher carried out market research, promoted new products, and encouraged users to commit fraud. Kate Anderson, Deputy Chief Crown Prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service, said, fraud is not a victimless crime, and the cost to many victims in this case had not just been financial. It had had a huge emotional impact, causing extreme distress and devastation to those affected, many of whom had their life savings stolen from them. Greater Manchester Police failed to disclose key evidence that could have prevented a man spending 17 years in prison for rape when no DNA linked him to the crime, a court appeal was told. Andrew Malkinson was convicted of raping a 33-year-old woman by the motorway in Greater Manchester in 2003. He has always insisted he was innocent, spending an extra decade in prison as a result. His case was referred to the Court of Appeal in January after another man's DNA was found on the victim's clothing. The victim said she recalled causing such a deep scratch to her attacker's cheek that she broke her nail. Yet Mr. Malkinson was seen by police the next day with no marks on his face. At the directions hearing in the Court of Appeal on Wednesday, it emerged that photographs of her left hand after the attack showing a broken nail were not disclosed at the original trial. Instead, the judge was able to suggest his summing up that she may have been mistaken about the scratch. The prosecution also failed to tell the court that a couple who claimed to have been able to identify Mr. Malkinson walking past their car had 16 convictions for 38 offences between them. The male witness also had a lengthy history of heroin addiction that was not known to the judge or jury. The prosecution's case relied on these eyewitnesses and the victim choosing Mr. Malkinson in a video lineup. The lack of DNA evidence was explained by saying that he was forensically aware and had deliberately left no trace. Wednesday's hearing also heard missed opportunities by the authorities to revisit Mr. Malkinson's case. Further forensic testing in 2009 revealed traces of a mixed DNA in saliva in the victim's bra that did not match Mr. Malkinson's, but the Criminal Cases Review Commission did not think it was enough to refer the case for appeal. Speaking outside the Royal Courts of Justice in London, Mr. Malkinson, 57, said he had often fantasised from prison about making it to appeal. He said the conviction means he is still on the sex offenders register and still being punished. He said, "It's been 20 years this August since I was taken and I'm still not free. I can't go on holiday. I can't leave this country. It's taken a big toll on me, a big toll on my mental health, as well as my physical freedom. I just want it to conclude as soon as possible." Edward Henry KC, representing Mr. Malkinson, said the case raised concerns about the police conduct because an array of procedural breaches and abdication of responsibility. A man was arrested on the 13th of December last year on suspicion of the rape after new DNA testing of a sample of the victim's clothing matched his on the police database. He has been released under investigation. A full hearing on the appeal is now scheduled for July. The Crown Prosecution Service is waiting for further forensic reports before deciding if they will oppose the appeal. Mr. Malkinson's lawyer, Emily Bolton, director of the charity appeals, said, "This process is taking way too long. The testing that they are doing now could have been commissioned on an urgent basis. This is not a system that is treating wrongful convictions as an emergency." As well as wanting his conviction overturned, Mr. Malkinson wants to be compensated. "They can't give me my life back, can they?" he said. "So the only thing they can do is give me a secure future for what's left of my life. I'm 57, I have type 1 diabetes, I'm not well, and I might not live another 10 years. A man who livestreamed a sadistic 2-hour attack on a man who died more than a week later has been jailed for life, even as his social media followers pleaded for him to stop. Declan O'Donnell repeatedly punched, kicked and stamped on Paul Cox, who was 63, for 2 hours. Mr. O'Donnell's aunt, who was Mr. Cox's partner, was also at their flat in Nottingham Centre at the time of the attack and begged him to stop beating the elderly man. The victim suffered 45 injuries, including a crushed esophagus and a blunt force injury to his spine and head. Police found an uncooperative Mr. O'Donnell at the scene, who tried to blag his way out of the situation, delaying even further the medical attention Mr. Cox needed. He was lying on the floor, covered in blood and unable to speak. Mr. O'Donnell, an alcoholic who drank 10 pints of beer and 2 shots, then threatened officers with a knife before being handcuffed. Mr. Cox died 9 days later of severe trauma on the 18th of February 2022. Mr. O'Donnell was sentenced to a minimum term of 23 years at Nottingham Crown Court. Court heard how Mr. O'Donnell of Mansfield Road blamed Mr. Cox for his mother's death by alcohol abuse. Yet there was no evidence at all to back this claim. The jury watched clip by clip the video Mr. O'Donnell filmed for his Facebook and Instagram followers. In the relentless and humiliating assault, the prosecution said Mr. Cox was kicked in the face, had his genitals stamped on, and was threatened with rape. Mr. O'Donnell was subsequently charged with murder. Mr. Cox was unable to provide an account before his death, but police figured out what happened using the livestream. While he admitted manslaughter, he pleaded not guilty to murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The prosecution rejected this, launching a trial on the 2nd of May. Judge James Sampson said that Mr. O'Donnell was suffering from a mental condition at the time of the attack, but this didn't absolve him from the brutal beating. "You punched him so hard that you damaged your own hand. With that punch, you knocked him out. And the injury to your hand angered you even more," he told Mr. O'Donnell. "For almost 2 hours, you subjected this defenseless and semi-conscious man to a relentless and humiliating assault. Throughout the attack, you filmed yourself and him as he lay bloody, beaten and distressed on the floor. Words do not do justice to the horror of the images the jury had to see. For Mr. Cox's family, life in jail for Mr. O'Donnell has at least brought some sense of justice. But as a family, we are so saddened at the thought of how many lives this has destroyed, they said in a statement shared by the force. Nothing can bring our Paul back, although it does not make what has happened any easier to deal with. We believe that this was truly the right result. For our family, the past 15 months have been the most difficult time of our lives, and now that this is over, we can finally focus on grieving for Paul.